Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Flex Cortex. Today, I'm joined by Rob, and we're going to be talking about facing adversity, which I think is going to be a really good topic. And we're going to talk about our own life experiences, and we're going to talk about different ways to look at it too, because I think oftentimes adversity is looked at this as this thing that defines you, but also you're not able to look at it from a good lens. So we're going to talk about a lot of the nuance of that today. So I'm looking forward to this conversation, man.
Man, thanks for having me back. Again, we all stoked to be here, and we all have a lot of examples I'm sure we could share in kind of with this subject matter. I know for me personally, anytime I was younger, really facing challenges for the first time, I just, due to my upbringing and the situation I was in, didn't have any tools in the toolbox, or I feel like back then there were no areas to go to really, find good advice that if it wasn't being delivered, from a parent figure. Um, but yeah, it's something that affects us all, and like anything we can share from a previous experience to help is always good.
Yeah. For sure. So, would you say that there was like a pinnacle moment for you where there was adversity in your life and you had to sink or swim, I guess, in a way, right? You had to
Yeah.
figure out what you're going to do, and how are you able to like shift that mindset? 'Cause I feel like a lot of people they face adversity and stuff happens to them in their lives, but maybe they take the approach of like more of like a victim mentality with it, right? And they don't see it as something that actually is there happening to them to like help mold them and shape them, but more something
Yeah.
that's happened to them and like identifies them, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, just thinking there, I have many examples in my life, I think, in different areas where this is figure it out after like kicking and screaming for a long time. But the most interesting part, and as we get into it, is that I find as I mature and get better, let's call it like let's call it the dance again. That's kind of what I call it when the intrusive thoughts and hard times take over. When
Hmm.
the dance comes in, as I age and mature and get more skills, sure, I can combat it better. But the biggest thing that I notice is that like my dance evolves with me, if that makes sense. So
Hmm.
the ways that I would tackle my adversity in some pretty intense situations when I was younger are completely different than the tools I use now. And those tools worked back then, but it's almost like as I got more evolved, so did the darkness, let's call it, did too.
Yeah,
And you have
yeah,
to
yeah.
take different examples. So, you know, if I can just share a story here, one of the ones that sticks out in my head is in 2012, I was 26, and we, yeah, for anyone that doesn't know, I was in, and I guess I'm still in the band Stereos. Started it with my best friends back in like 2006. Had some success, got to do some cool things around the world, but led to a lot of what we talk about now. And as fast as our rise was, our fall was just as fast. And I thought I'd be doing this forever. I really sacrificed a lot of my life. Was married to someone in Los Angeles, and my life was just kind of revolved around if we were touring, living in Toronto and LA, flying back and forth, coming to Edmonton whenever we had a show to, visit family. I would come some extra days. But all of a sudden, in 2012, I had just come back from the summer in Hong Kong and Bali. And it's like the world basically said, hey, man, you made it this far. Cool. But let's try again. And the whole thing just flipped. Very amicable, but ended up getting separated from my partner.
Hmm.
Band basically decided to go. We needed a hiatus, a break from each other, and all of a sudden, I thought my life was living in LA. I was just discovering training, and we were killing it in on the charts back then and on the radio, and it was all gone. And all of a sudden, by that October, I was back in the basement of my parents' house where I dreamed the whole thing up, and I couldn't believe it. And I don't know. Like I've seen dark times for sure, but this one was the first, other than family loss and like school, high school stuff. This one really, really got me. It crippled me. It hit me. It felt like weight on my body. It felt like when I would wake up, there was this crushing feeling on my chest. I couldn't find. I've always been like a happy, funny dude, and I couldn't find humor. I couldn't find. The only thing I could find was alcohol, and I self-medicated on it for a long, long time, and it got really dark.
Hmm.
I'll pause it there for a sec if you want to share anything on that. That's kind of what led up to it, and like at this point here of October of 2012, I'm telling you, like it, I have no problem sharing this, but it got to the point where I would have to literally have a bottle of vodka beside my bed. And, like, the demons and stuff were so bad, and I had no skills that I would drink to sleep, and I knew it was bad, and I couldn't see that light at the end of the tunnel. Like I couldn't see how to get out of it. I couldn't. Music didn't sound as good to me. We decided that we were going to record another album in Vancouver that November, so like right in the middle of it, and I was like, I'm not even in a place where I can even get in a car. Like it was.
Yeah, no, first of all, I think I appreciate the vulnerability. I think that's one thing that I think needs to be discussed and brought up more, those things too, because they're very common and they do happen, right? But being that, alcoholism and drug addiction and a lot of these things, I guess these forms of escapism, right, are very common. What was something that you did to actually work through this? And
Man, yeah.
I'm
Well,
curious as to how, because again, like obviously you were in a place where obviously you saw that as being your route or your way to
mhm.
cope or maybe your way out. But how did you push through?
Well, man, I think about this a lot, and I think about it in reference whenever I go through any adversity now. And this will sound hilarious, but I really gather my inspiration. I mean, like most people do, from media and like movies I like and that. And I remember this scene in a movie. It's the movie 500 Days of Summer. It's an awesome like rom-com, great soundtrack, but it's all LA. So I kind of was like staying away from it because I just didn't want any LA memories at the time. The problem
Hmm.
wasn't LA, the problem was inside here. But there's a scene when he's getting over summer and he's in that self spiral. He's drinking every day, waking up, nothing's fun. He's got a bad attitude about everything. And he's just laying on his bed in the middle of the day, face down, prone position, and he's got a tennis ball and he's just throwing it against the wall. Then all of a sudden, there starts to be a rhythm to it. What's the word we're looking for? There's an intention. And it's just rhythmic. It's intention. All of a sudden, you see this. There was just something in that, and I'm like, okay, if I can just get something moving, I know it will build, or at least I can just focus on what this next step will be, and then if I only focus on this, I won't see all this darkness that is slash I think is around me.
Hmm.
And what I did is I was like, well, before I left LA, I was becoming a trainer, and that was something that gave me the feeling that music gave me. And I never thought I'd find anything else like that. So I was like, okay, let's see what's happening in the city. And I had a friend that worked at World Health at the time, and I reached out on got it. I think we passed MySpace and Facebook days, and that's how I started my training career. Which I'll kind of like jump to the end here, but there was this visual of the ball, and I knew nothing of what I know now of like all the wisdom I like to read, all like power of mindset. I knew if anything, I thought it was cool to be negative. Like I just thought it was awesome to just like not give a fuck about anything and just kind of go through
Yeah,
life.
yeah, yeah.
But there was this momentum. And I say this all the time now. There was this momentum created that first was my understanding of the like how this, even though it was a movie, how this guy got out of it. And I thought, okay, well, if that ball's going in my mind and it's bouncing, I'm gonna reach out. Let's see if I can get something going for myself. And I didn't even have a car. I would take the bus from like Northeast Edmonton to Southside World Health. And I was happy as a clown. All of a sudden, these songs started sounding good. All of a sudden, all this stuff happened. All of a sudden, music doors started opening up. And there's like an area down there, like kind of South Edmonton, that I only feel empowered when I drive through because of this change. But it really took support from friends. And I would say from October, like I did everything the wrong way. I ran away to Mexico to basically drink more and run away from the problems in this trip, which only led me further and further back. And it just like it's this tennis ball. It's this bouncing of the tennis ball and the visual of like the inertia and the momentum that really just translated to my brain and started me on this like lifetime of seeking more tools or like almost craving the dark times to be like, what will I learn in this? And I
Hmm.
shifted that focus. And it wasn't, this is happening to me. It's here to teach me something. There's something off in how I'm living, what I'm doing. And this isn't the world coming to get me. This is it. This is a wake up sign. This is me able to now be like, okay, what am I doing? What can I do better here? What can I learn from? And it's not this shaking foundation anymore. And that was really the first calamity that I felt that led to, again, the problem's just getting started, but it was the first little bit of knowing I can pick myself up from times where I think I can't even focus enough energy to like wash my face at night, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's interesting. I actually just had a conversation with somebody yesterday about intention. And it's kind of funny you mentioned intention today. And I think intention and momentum kind of just go hand in hand, right? If we
Yeah,
can be intentful with what we're trying to do or what we're trying to accomplish or our life in general, I feel like you're mentioning, we just need a little bit of like momentum to snowball. And then
yeah,
once we have that momentum snowball, then you're able to actually be adhering to something, and we're actually able to be consistent with something, and then within that too, you're going to be seeing changes in your life. But it's interesting how, like, maybe you, if you'd watched that movie at a different point in your life, maybe you wouldn't
yeah,
have interpreted that a certain way. But
totally,
but
totally.
you watched that movie at that point in time, and it just resonated with you, right? It's kind of like, I know you and I have discussed it pretty heavily too, but like reading a certain book at a certain time,
Oh my
like,
gosh, it's like the world's changed.
yeah, reading a certain book or watching a certain show or a certain movie. And it's so interesting that, like, depending on where you're at in your life, the message that is trying to be derived off of whatever you're watching will be just received differently. So it's cool how for you, you're able to like see that movie, even though maybe it's like a cheesy rom-com, whatever, but still the idea of like, oh, this means something to me, right?
Mhm.
This is indicative of what's going on in my life right now. And it's cool that you're
Yeah,
able to see it as that.
man, thank you. It's funny because I go back to the movie a lot, and the music's awesome. But it took like again, I any like how do you avoid stuff like when you're into like fitness, like music and skateboarding? How do you avoid Los Angeles consuming it? It's impossible, man. It's like that. I mean, I see it differently now, but back then that was the epicenter of everything I ever cared about in this world. It seems like it started. But anyway, how easy, and this is something I thought of, and I want to ask you about this. How easy is it for us to talk about this now? But when you're in it, like when
Hmm.
you're in the trenches, I can't, or I can now, but I can access this. Like I don't have that brain. And so when you're really in the adversities hitting, what kind of physiological or psychological effects are you feeling?
Oh man, when I'm like deep in it, like let's say I'm deep in the trenches and I'm just, yeah, there's no, at that point in time there's so much cloudy when it comes to just like logic,
Hmm.
when it comes to thinking rationally. Um, Oftentimes it's just so much cloud via just emotion. I'm not able to
Yeah,
really do a ton, and I feel like it's hard to actually, like you mentioned, like it's hard to actually move forward and have these things compound, and the intention just isn't there, I find. And I feel like it's challenging because when you're in it too, you feel a little bit lost.
lost. Yeah, it's almost okay. Follow up question to that. When we would go through it younger and we know we didn't have this amazing forum to talk about things like this, we didn't have like all the conversations we have, even the knowledge we have, these things would happen and I thought, okay, this is reality, this is exactly what is. And I
Hmm.
wasn't aware that there were ways out. I wasn't aware that there were different attitudes. You know, they told us in sports when I was younger, attitude is everything, which is the most true sentence I think I've ever. But I didn't care back then. I cared about being cool. That's all that mattered to me. It was like the silliest classic teenager thing. But now, when these things happen, I'm self-aware in them, and I've had a lot of conversations with other people that have these similar interests as us, and people deal with these situations, especially. Yeah, we've made progress, but we're still not.
Yeah.
I find it almost can be worse sometimes. It's like I know what my brain is doing against me, and it bugs me that it's happening sometimes. And sometimes I'm like, man, I wish sometimes I wasn't so like, okay, all right, I'm feeling resistance, and that means that now my access to all my knowledge is closing down. And it's like, am I self creating that by overthinking it too much? And not, because I truly believe we have a natural system that would just completely take care of this. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. No,
have
you're
you
good.
noticed that difference? You know?
Yeah, I think a big part of it is actually, I was watching a podcast recently, and it was talking about, just specifically in this case, it was around men, but it was talking about how a lot of men aren't comfortable expressing themselves just via circumstance and via who they're surrounded by, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it too is correlated to upbringing. Like a lot of it is correlated to what was presented to them as like a father figure, or who was like their father figure or their strong like a male role model in their life.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
what they presented towards them too was like, did they talk about their emotions? Did they feel their emotions? Did they see emotions as a bad thing? Did they see, was anger a thing that you saw as being really bad? Did it shatter the dynamic in the household, right? And I think within that too, like when you're a kid, you don't really have that thought process formed yet, or when you're younger. So I feel like it's hard to oftentimes navigate these things just because you are a child or you are quite a bit younger, where you just lack the experience, right? And I
Yeah.
think a lot of it comes down to not having your own thought process developed yet. But I think once
Hmm.
you've been able to develop your own thought process, your own like way of thinking, then you realize that it is in your control. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of it too,
Oh,
though, is who you surround yourself with. And that kind of segues also into this podcast that I had watched about surrounding yourself with people that value the same things as you. And because obviously there's going to be a lot of friction if you yourself value communication, but the friends that you spend your time with do not. So
yeah.
it's good to spend your time with people that are open to having these conversations, like you and me. Like a lot of people that I have in my life right now, I'm very thankful to have people that I can talk to about this stuff, right? But I think a big part of it too is people don't feel comfortable expressing those things to their friends or to their family, whatever it may be, and they attach that to a very implosive thought process
Yeah.
because they're just like, hey, well, I can't talk to anybody about this, but I have to just like self destruct because I can't talk about
And
this.
exactly. And I know that feeling. I lived, I'd say, a better half of my life, not good half of my life
Yeah.
in I think that paradigm. Like, I don't. Well, I tried to. Man. I've tried every excuse to get out of, or every easy way. I've tried everything except actually working on myself. That's what did it, or continues to help my growth journey. I tried to blame my parents for not giving me an example on it, or for like choosing North Edmonton. It's funny; those are the things I love about myself. This upbringing like that. And I realize now that I've gotten to this age, like I'm 10 years older now than when my parents had me. But when I think back to the age of like when I was 27, 28, me, I don't blame them. Like I get it. I get why the things I thought were like not good as a kid, like why it could have been tough. So I understand that more, and I don't use that excuse anymore. But when I was a kid and these things would happen, I did have music. I played hockey, so I couldn't. Sports weren't really an escape for me because they were causing a lot of my stress too.
Yeah.
But my
Yeah.
escapism back then was really about music, and in like the punk rock and like the rap and EDM and stuff I liked. I could tell other people had experienced what I did, and that kept me going enough to not get too dark, and make some decisions I would have regretted back then. And it's funny that those things are still big for me now. But what I'm leaning into is how did, and maybe we can just create a discussion of this. How you maybe would have coped back then in adversity, as opposed
Mhm.
to the methods and tools you would use now.
Oh man. Um, I feel like this is a good talking point. Anyways, I feel like a lot of people when they're faced with adversity, they tend to lean towards a vice or vices, right? And whether it's a conscious or subconscious thing, I think it's still very relevant, right? Um, I think for myself now, what I've realized is those impulses are still there,
Oh yeah.
but the biggest thing that's changed is the awareness around it.
Ooh, tell me
So
more.
I think like yeah, and we'll talk more about that. So I would say like even when I'm going through adversity now, or when I'm going through any kind of we'll call it mental friction, right? Whenever I'm going through a period where I'm experiencing something like that, I still feel like those impulses are still there. And I kind of say like that's like your, in a sense, like your default settings, right? You
Yeah.
tend to almost want to resort back to that and do a factory reset in a sense. But what I've realized now, the biggest thing that's changed is I can kind of catch myself before I spiral, which,
There's a little window there. It seems.
yeah,
There's like a
Yeah,
little brief second where you can be like, am I going to take this route or am I going to go this way, man?
dude, exactly. Yeah, you kind of come to like a road, like a crossroad really quickly, and there's two paths, right? Like you mentioned, and then you're
Yeah.
like, okay, which one am I going to take? And
Yeah.
it's that moment of realization that you get just with time. And before, I don't think I had that. I think I would just like resort to the normal spiral and the normal loop.
Hmm.
And that would just, go back to more self-destructive cycles, right? Maybe it'd be pornography consumption,
Yeah.
food consumption, or it would just be social media binging or whatever it would be, right? It would just be like some very self-destructive behaviors. But again, I think the biggest thing that's changed now is the awareness of like, oh, these are my emotions that I'm feeling.
Hmm.
What's going on in my life that's triggering these thoughts? And then you just have to
Or on
do
the
it like,
inside.
yeah, right. And then I'm sure you could probably even attest to that too, or even provide
Yeah.
some context as to what you've done as well. But like for myself, I think that's the biggest thing is just I've become more aware. That's all.
Yeah. And I think if I was aware, what a word, the awareness. And let's say that a little bit too. And you mentioned like pornography as a vice there, which is something we talk about a lot in
Yeah,
parts
yeah.
of our life. And you and I seem to have no problem being vulnerable about that. And maybe we'll get into that in here, maybe we'll get into it later. But there's a lot of interesting stuff to talk about there for sure. Um, I think if I was looking at, if I was flipping through the podcasts I do and I saw one that said facing adversity, if I was me, what I'd want to get out of there is like, what are these guys doing? So one of the biggest things I think I'm gonna, and I very much like I haven't solved this. I've gotten better. I've gotten better for sure. I've gotten to understand myself. I've spent enough time with myself, kicking and screaming, being self-destructive that I just decided to try different things. So this is not some destination I've arrived at healing. This is the rest of my life, trying to move that a little farther every day. I'll
I
say it
agree.
every day. Strive for progress, not perfection, as Denzel says in The Equalizer. Great movie.
Dude, that's so true
Um,
though. So true
yeah.
though.
Oh my gosh. Like there's that little. I don't. My personality type. That little line there. That could get me through some serious things. Some
Yeah.
serious things. But I know for me now, at this point, when adversity comes, I feel, let's call it again the dance, the first little bit of cortisol rush, um, because it can really trigger, and it's different now. It's not this like I've made some stupid decisions and now my life is falling apart, and it's not these crazy things that used to happen to me in my 20s when the band was going on and everything, because I've just really calmed down and I really live my routine and all that. I find that it's a compounding effect now. So let's say I get cut off in traffic and I'm in a bad mood, and then I start noticing this, communicating with my partner not in like the best way, and we're just both digging at each other and just doing something stupid. That's how it leads now. Then it turns into like a miscommunication with the client and those things, and that seems to be where the big kind of adversity comes from. But
Hmm.
life-changing things that used to happen, it's like there was this rush of cortisol, and it's the nerve, right? The nerve activation there. But the problem with it for me is that activation, even though it could be something as simple, like let's say a client chooses to no longer continue with you, like that is simply all that is. Like no, they're not going to change with you. Like sometimes you get people that literally just need that social outlet, and they'll be with you forever, legit, like a good like few years. But what it still feels like a breakup sometimes, like when clients go, and I didn't have the self worth or self esteem to look inside and be like, this is a business transaction, man. That's all good. I can still call so and so afterwards and see what's up.
Hmm.
It would lead to dark places, and I would feel the rush. I would feel the rejection. I would feel everything I didn't deal with as a kid that I experienced. And it was that feeling that reminded me of back then. And all of a sudden in my brain, and in a PTSD kind of way, it's creating that scenario in my brain, and it's what I'm seeing. But it's not what's happening right now. What's happening right now is a client just decided not to train with me anymore because they the time is done. It's a very
Hmm.
natural thing we'll face all the time. But I've attached all this old physiological feeling to it, and that's happening. And that's the only thing that gets me now is when that cycle starts, and I'm like, that's the choice. There's the choice there. I think about everything I just said,
Yeah.
and I take that. And that doesn't mean I'm going to feel better instantly. That means I've seen it. And I feel like I've taken in enough wisdom now and heard enough stories of here's the problem inside me. So now I'm looking at it from here as it kind of just goes through. And it's
Yeah.
not becoming my entire reality. So that's step one to me, is saying, here it is. Here it is again. And I create it sometimes. And I'm like, all right, round two, fight. Let's go.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
From there, kindness to yourself, right? Because a lot of people then would go, oh, I'm so I did this to myself. Oh, like woe is me. And hey, man, no judgment, no judgment at all. I spend as long as you need in there. We all do it. We'll spend time in that, like, in that zone before we rise up. But skipping that step can be, to me, the hardest, is not being me self. And then I just know what makes me happy. I just, no matter what I'm doing, that's like, I can't be the person I want to be to everybody else unless I'm doing it to myself first. And that there is an EDM album that just seems to create feelings in me that are great. The sun,
Yeah.
walking, and then again, knowing that I have people in my life that I can have these conversations with.
Yeah.
And I can get myself out pretty good now. Doesn't mean it won't be millions more. Doesn't mean there won't be relapses, but that seems to be where I start my cycle, you know. And then or doing something for somebody else can be huge to stop that too. You know, like, I can't help myself right now. I feel like shit, so I'm gonna go shovel my friend's walk. You know, which sounds selfish, man. It does, because you're doing it for yourself, but that's not the case. Because in that, why does that feel so good? Helping someone out, you feel better.
Yeah. You and I have talked about this immensely, but I have one little piece I want to add on to this first.
Sure.
Why do you think, because I had this issue too, why do you think that people tend to take things so personally?
Oh,
And
what a question.
I think it's because it hits a pain point of self-worth.
Ooh, want to elaborate on that more?
So when we lose a client,
Hmm.
right? Because we've both experienced that too, right? We're like super spontaneously, someone's like, "Hey, man, I'm so sorry. This month I can't. This
Yeah,
month is my last month," or it's abrupt. "Hey, man, I can't
yeah,
pay you tomorrow. Something happened in my life," right? The immediate thought process, and I can say this for myself too, is, "Wow, it's because they don't want to work with me as a coach or as a
yeah.
person,"
Hmm.
even though. Even though it could be something completely separate, they could have experienced, like, maybe something happened with their car and they have to replace a transmission, or something happened with their family and they have to, like, delegate that money towards something else. But I think
Yeah,
we tend to resort to it being something internal. It's
yeah,
something against us personally, which again hits like that emotional pain point of like, oh, you don't like me as a person.
yeah, yeah. I I still deal with that. Like, when I'm at my best, let's say I know what makes me feel like when I'm at my best. I'm at my best. I'm living good. I'm
Yeah.
sleeping, I'm eating, I have, non-negotiables I'm accomplishing every day. I'm reading good, I'm being a great father. Like, I'm just like feeling myself. Those things don't affect me. I see it
Yeah.
completely objectively. And I
See?
see, like, hey man, it has been amazing working with you. Oh my gosh. And there's that saying, like, give a man a fish, he'll eat that night, teach them to fish, they'll eat for the rest of their lives, right? And like, that's how I
Agreed.
approach training as well. It's like, I'm here to teach you as well. You're not going to train with me forever, but you're going to work out forever now. That you're going to have this information forever. And I see it so clear and it's so chill. And then the days I don't have it, I feel that whole cycle we just talked about, if that
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
And that goes back to, though, me doing the things that make me um at my best, right? Like, consciously, with intention, choosing today, Sunday. Okay, we're doing this on a Sunday. I have the day in front of me after this. I'm gonna walk downtown. There's a bookstore I like to go to every Sunday. But I'm doing those things. A, they bring me happiness and they calm me and they give me mindfulness and awareness on a day, on a rest day like today. But also, it's setting me up tomorrow to be like, ooh, if calamity strikes, I'm not like, oh, how can I deal with this today? I was up till 2 last night, and man, I lived that way for so long, and I just couldn't. I would turtle, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not trying to say, like, you can't hurt me, and like, that's not a knock on David Goggins' book. That book is awesome.
Yeah.
I
I
just
agree.
I I would turtle. I was like, I can't make the right decision now. So before I would just fight everything, because it was just all I knew. It was silly.
It's normal. It's normal.
Then I
Yeah.
would turtle, and now, from a place of calmness, I can do it. And just to build on that for one more thing, the initial shock of it is such a liar. It's such
Mm.
a it's so deceptive. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Because you're like, this is happening, and I have been like misjudged and attacked on a personal
Yeah.
level, and
Yeah.
it's almost hilarious to watch what pops up in my mind about
Dude.
loved ones. Like
Yeah.
people have been like, and that drives me mental. It's just driven me mental enough that now I can wait, and if I can wait past that 5 minute storm
Dude,
passing
100%.
through, it's like,
Yeah.
oh gosh, Rob, like there's some clarity there.
Yeah, I think I love what you said there. And I think it really comes down to just taking a mere second to catch yourself before you react.
Hmm.
I think it takes a matter of
React.
yeah, it's like
That's
it's
a word,
exactly
hey?
right. It's like we have control of two things in our lives, and it's our actions and our reactions. That's literally it, right?
And that seems to be the all of the conversations that have led to us having these discussions and with our colleagues and stuff. That seems to be what we come back to in almost every single discussion. And
That's all we have control of, man. That's it.
imagine you were about to go into imagine someone came down. I hate it. Well, I don't know what's whatever, but like the first person that pictured in my head was Elon Musk coming down to tell you this. It just seems
Sure.
like something he would do, And he's like, hey,
Very important business meeting that we're meeting with Elon
he's like, hey
Musk.
man, stop you for a second here. I've created this cool virtual reality game called Life, and you're gonna go in it. I can't tell you what's gonna happen to you, but you're gonna have the cool little code I'm gonna let you have is that you get to
Yeah.
decide how everything feels and how you respond to everything. You'd be like, oh my god, I'm gonna go do everything. We have that.
Yeah.
We have that. And it's like it seems to be like to know to your emotional intelligence and your ability to weather that storm seems to be like the master key to do everything. Because what like I know the person that I am when I'm at my best, and the person I strive to be every day is like that. It
Yeah, dude.
is like one of my favorites. Alan Watts says it's about how you walk through the fire,
Love
and
that
that's
quote.
what I
Yeah.
want. And now I have a daughter being born in the summer. I want to set here's what I think a good man looks like and can looks like in our like here's what a skill I think is huge. And I feel like every topic I talk about, every book I read seems to be coming back to that, and that being the key is to
Hmm.
have that stoic ability, not shutting off emotions, knowing emotions, being comfortable to
Yeah.
sit with them. And we spoke about this last time we were together on the
We did,
pod.
yeah.
But yeah, and I think you had gotten it from a book, but I've been thinking about it again, and I'll reference it again. But when the friction comes, I sit with it. I'll have a coffee there. I felt friction this morning. I had a really bad sleep last night, and I felt friction, and I was like, dude, you've been through this a million times. As soon as you start talking, you're good. And
Yeah.
I just sat with it, knowing there is another side of this. Like the sun is rising on the other side. Um, and it's just really like I was telling some of our colleagues too, and you, like when that first little hit comes, like write those things down so you can read them when you're on the blissful side and see how truly maniacal it can be.
Yeah. Yeah, we create a lot of our own suffering, right? And I think you and I have discussed that together too, but I think we create a lot of our own suffering because we tend to be our worst critics. And I before we move on, I wanted to quickly just mention this thing too where, I think the things that happen in our lives, the things that would present as adversity, they don't change. But I think, like you mentioned, a good point there about emotional intelligence. I think our emotional intelligence just improves, right?
Yeah,
I don't think
yeah,
the things that happen to you necessarily change. Like somebody could still cut you off in traffic, but the emotional intelligence is like, are you going to go in front of them, brake check them, and flip them off, right? Like that's and it seems so
that
like
feels so right sometimes.
right. And sometimes you're like, I need that, right? I need to show them. I need to show them how they wronged me, right?
Yeah. Oh my
But
gosh,
like,
that's so
but
silly.
but it's like taking a second and being like, okay, is this a big deal?
Does this matter?
Did they hit me? Maybe they didn't see me. Maybe they're having a bad day. It's like we've all had bad days, dude. Where like we cut somebody off, we flip somebody off, we do something stupid out in public because we're just having a bad day. We're mad at the world. So it's like, does that person necessarily need you to rebuttal and be like, you know what, screw you, fuck you,
all,
I'm gonna do
all we're
this to you as
doing,
well.
all we do is increase that anger. You just increase the negativity there. Like, how many times have you been cut off or something like felt wronged in traffic, and then they give you a wave, and you're instantly like, "Oh,
Yeah,
good.
dude,
No,
dude.
we're good, man." Like, you
Yeah,
could do
yeah,
anything, and that wave just instantly was like, "Okay, I get it." And that's fun, man. So I'll like just imagine the wave, but again, like I used to be so reactive, right? And like
me too.
I thought it was like I thought it was being a man and like being like proactive, right? And like that. Oh no, like here's my boundary. I'll be the loudest in the room, and it's just going nowhere. Like absolutely. But what does is
Yeah.
seeing that, having the intelligence and having the emotional understanding to be like, oh man, been there, man, been where you are, man. But I'll just let you experience that, you know. And hey,
Yeah.
again, this is like 6 out of 10 times now I can do this, but just even having that helps so much. But it's funny about the power of the wave, you know. And there's like I think as humans, we want to be nice to each other. We do.
Yeah,
Like we so
1000%.
like there's nothing cooler than community and vibing out with people, right? It's just we're
Yeah.
all on the wrong day, man, that you're just in the race and you're like it can just I just can't live that way. Like I can't live that way. I've heard enough like I find it interesting reading confessions, which sounds like very morbid and weird. Just things that the wisdom from our like our senior citizens, like that being like, hey, I wish I would have done this in my life. And how many times have you heard me talk about this guy?
So many times.
Yes,
Yeah.
I know, dude.
The
Sometimes I'm
guy
like,
that
is
told
he
you to jump
real?
in the body of water, every body of
Yeah.
water, right?
Hey, and my one of my best friends told me that I should hop into every body of water I see too. But the guy's got his appendix removed in Tucson, Arizona, so he got something.
Yeah, you also got to tell him too that hey man, I live in Alberta, so I don't know if every body of water is really gonna work, but
Man, for about 2 years I did it. Oh, it was awesome. It was awesome. Then you go to places like Iceland, and you're like, I'm not hopping in that, man. I'm not
oh
doing it.
yeah.
Um,
No, and I,
the
I kind of wanted
yeah,
to add like one more point, right? And I think it's this idea of just as we get more, I don't even know if you want to say the word is established, right? As we get more established, and I think as we grow more and as we learn more too, it's just a matter of having a better understanding of like what triggers you
yeah. So then, do
and
you think you would avoid that, or just know it and be prepared for it?
know and be prepared. So I think before I would try to avoid,
Hmm.
but then I've realized that you can't.
Okay.
And the more that you try to avoid, the more that it'll tend to frustrate you. So I think it's more of a preparation thing now. Because how can you actually control what's going to happen to you? You can't.
Yeah. You said an important thing happened to you.
Yeah.
You get to decide what that is. It seems to be like I'm going through my world today. Let's say something happens over here. I, I'll feel it, but I can choose to grab onto it and make that my reality at that point, or do I keep walking? You know, it's almost like there's these little um, like I'm in GTA. I've been thinking about GTA lately, and that game
Sure,
just,
dude.
yeah, dude, I don't know, that game just seemed to get me. When the Los Angeles fires were happening, I saw a little meme come up that someone used the GTA San Andreas map to explain where all the fires actually were in LA, and it just, even though I know LA, it just clicked in my head.
You're
So I've
like,
been
oh
thinking about
yeah,
GTA.
GTA 5. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, okay.
yeah.
But it's like if I'm walking through, all these little side quests are popping up. Like, hey, do you want to take this? Do you want to take this road? Do you want to take this road of anger? Do you want to go down this road of this? And I'm just like,
Yeah.
side mission, or do I keep going? Right? And every single person that hears this, and every single person out there, whether I know, no, I get it. Like, so I've only experienced what I've experienced. I've talked to people that have experienced things that could be deemed worse than me. I don't know what that feels like, but I do know what compassion and understanding feels like, and I will always
Hmm.
understand that. So I'm not saying this is what will work. This is just what it is. Um, but nothing is happening to me if I don't think it is, and I truly believe that. If I had really the big one I was going to share was what happened to me last year. I just said it again. I just said happened to me. I'll say the experience that I chose to experience last last year, and coming back from California. But I just
Happened
can't stop.
happened for
Yeah,
happened for you.
happened for me because truthfully, I'm in the best place I've ever been in my life right now, back home in North Edmonton, where I started this whole thing. where I started the whole idea of running away from this whole thing. And I couldn't have got here if I didn't go out and experience that whole hero's journey, right? That whole
Hmm.
journey there's no way I could have been the father or the husband and stuff I wanted to be if I hadn't experienced all of those things. And the last time I went through it, I knew that. The last real adversity in my life, I had these tools through, and it was completely different than anything I've ever experienced. Now, it was not easy. It was not any better or worse. It was just different, and it demanded a different approach. And I bet you I made up, we love misery, and it's so easy to hold yourself in your own prison. And this reminded me of something I wanted to ask you. Like, do you think we're addicted to that as people? Calamity and getting self-help.
Oh man, I think maybe to a degree.
Yeah, yeah,
I think
because
it's
I know
because
from
I think part of it creates excitement.
yeah, oh, of course, and 100% the dopamine is going to come as you start to problem solve and everything too. But when things are really smooth sailing, when I got sober, when I got started to get a little more mentally healthy, I noticed that when things were what people would call calm and good, I had never experienced that before. It was always like extreme highs and extreme lows that I didn't know what to
Yeah,
do, and I would stir shit up, not even knowing it, just subconscious pattern. Something's off right now. Who's off? And I would just like dig at friends and like create little stories because my own existence was only calamity and how to get out of it.
yeah, yeah.
It's
No,
weird,
it's
man.
it's so interesting how. Yeah, I firmly don't think that the things that happen to us really change in the frequency that things happen. I just think our perception of these things changes over time as long as you're doing the work, right? And I think a lot of people tend
Hmm.
to avoid the work because it's uncomfortable. Like a lot
It
of it's
is.
uncomfortable, right? And a lot of it's very
It is.
a lot of it is very revealing. And you have to have a
Yeah.
lot of awareness around it. You have to be able to honestly look at yourself and be like, you know what? I am not where I want to be, but that's okay.
Doesn't this sound like the first day in the gym?
Yeah, it does.
Isn't it the same thing, really? You know, like, and we took that step, and we're professionals in that industry now, and it's the same thing. It's that first. How many times have we told clients like you like? I remember I was working with someone who they even the thought of getting to they knew they had to do this doctor's orders like very intense health things. The win that we started to do was just drive to the parking lot. Prove you can get to the parking lot. Tomorrow we'll go in the front door. And it's a little bit of momentum pieces, but it's the same with when it was time to work on myself. Again, I chose someone I couldn't do it for me. I couldn't find the self-love or self-esteem to be like, all right, Rob, let's fix this. I was living with someone that I thought deserved a way better version of me. But that first little step, and we should elaborate on this too because it's important. Like that's the hardest thing. You don't know what's next, and we look down that path, but all we need to
Hmm.
do is look at that first one, and that first one literally could be like, I'm gonna brush my hair today. I'm gonna get my
Dude.
pajamas today. I'm
Yeah.
going to maybe instead of drinking before noon, I'll wait. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but I mean that's what
No,
small
it makes
steps can look
sense.
relatively, right?
Yeah.
So for you, man, like what does that step? What does that first step look like to you? Maybe before and now.
The first step of what, sorry?
What can I do to, let's say you're pre-18, let's go pre-18, and then you're in whatever, you can make it up in your head or something actually happened. What was
Hmm.
the first step to get yourself out, feeling better, solving a problem,
Oh,
getting away, or like confronting adversity?
yeah. So I'll say that for probably when I was younger and for a long time after too, I expected people around me to help me regulate.
Profound.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think it came down to, and I've understood this deeper now and more fully now, but I think it was because I was not able to regulate myself.
Yeah.
But it was also came down to me not being able to give myself what I needed internally. I think I was looking towards a lot of things extrinsically, and I think that put a lot of pressure onto people having to make me feel better. And I think within that too, you get a lot of frustration because you're like, well, I feel this way right now, and it's up to you to fix it. You have to make
Hmm.
me feel better but then at the end of the day, it's because I couldn't make myself feel better.
We were almost
And
told that that's what relationships were back then.
dude, 100%. And like,
Yeah.
I was listening to this podcast the other day, and it kind of ties in a little bit too. It was all about like self worth, and he was saying that as a society, a lot of people tend to applaud and congratulate themselves just solely on outcomes.
Hmm.
And within this too, it just instills a lot of outcome driven ways of thinking to a lot of people. So he was talking about how it's really good to focus on trying to applaud and congratulate yourself just on efforts, not just on outcomes, but on efforts too. And
Yeah.
yeah, because that's really important.
I recently heard of something exactly like that, and it was in a parenting sense of like, don't. I'm not saying don't, man. Like, I don't want to say anything set in stone here. Just my understanding of this was like, it's important to focus on great effort with your kids as opposed to like way to smash that test, which is still good, but it's the effort that got you there. Then it's not dopamine outcome results, right? It's, oh my gosh, my work ethic. And again, nothing ever feels good as the journey. Even like there's like a brief second when I accomplish a goal where I'm like, but then it's like, what now? What now? You know, and that again, that's where I'm at in my life, and that's where I choose to be now because I'm hungry for that kind of experience right now. Um,
Yeah.
but the relying on other people's to make it like I did that, and um, I'm sure I'll spend a lot of my time on this planet thinking about how I could have done things better, and I just demanded myself the fullest. I'm kind to that person. I'm not talking about younger me, but I just didn't. I was like, I feel this way. Who's gonna fix this? You know what I mean? Who's gonna do this? And I couldn't. I didn't understand that. It just that part of my brain wasn't there. Like that info wasn't there, right? And it's like
Yeah.
that's why you and I talk about how important it is to be listening to pods and just chatting with people because when things are bad, I know for me it really helps knowing that there are other people like me out there. Like I've had such an improvement in my overall just like how I feel about my social life and everything. Just hanging out at the gym talking to you guys about these things
Yeah.
and because we're all
Yeah.
it's just awesome. It's so awesome. And like I didn't think I'd find other groups of people that were any different than I'd felt in Toronto and LA, like wherever. But it's just you get that, and that goes back to what you said at the start. You get that group of people that are your people that are on similar things, and it's incredible what you can really do to push it forward there. The when I keep thinking about the word adversity on obviously what this pod or what this pod is on, and I keep getting other ideas and facing adversity. That sentence or that little piece right there, like it's kind of all it is just like you got to face it. You have to face it, and that you could face it right now when it happens, which to me is the most effective way in myself once I let the storm pass. And at some point it's going to face or it's just going to keep
Yeah.
going, and I've only ever seen that to be true, whether it's the same pattern in partners, whether it's the same pattern in your workplace, right? So if I already ask you right now, guys, give me the top five, like, like those classic, like, thumbnails on YouTube where it's like, do these 5 steps to make sure you're never sad again. Like, what would those be to you? It doesn't have to be five, but what do some of those bullet points look like to you?
To being able to handle adversity or face
Step one,
adversity.
step two, step three. Yeah.
Oh man. Okay. I think the first thing, and I think this is pretty major too, is trying to realize what it's teaching you.
Hmm.
And I think it's the whole idea of, well, it's like what we just discussed in this pod too. Instead of things happening to you, they're happening for you.
Hmm.
So if even with that little bit of a shift of that mindset, you're able to see something as happening for you in a sense of trying to build your character. And I think
Yeah.
it within that too, it tends to eliminate the severity of things that are happening to you. But as soon as you can see it as a lesson, it
Yeah.
makes the adversity easier to face. Versus if you see it as something that you're having to just tackle, and it's something that like is unfortunately happening to you. The second thing I would say is definitely work on trying to boost your emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
The more well-rounded you are, the more that you can understand yourself and people in the world, these things become a lot easier to navigate and understand. And
Hmm.
there's no one certain way to work on somebody's emotional intelligence. Like, it could be listening to podcasts, it could be listening to audiobooks, it could be reading, it could be having conversations at a place that you feel comfortable doing so. Just
Hmm.
some way where you can comfortably express how you feel. You can get some really good feedback, you can get some positive criticism too, and you can actually grow from it. Because I think that's the biggest thing too, is if you're able to actually challenge your current thought process, and if you're able to open up your mind to what could possibly be, you're going to improve your
Yeah.
emotional intelligence. And I think
Oh
that's a big
yeah.
part of it too, is just being able to understand that, like, okay, well, this is kind of where I am right now, and maybe there's beauty in the fact that you're never going to get to where you want to be, but also you can keep striving forward too. And
Yeah.
probably those are probably the main two for myself, I would say. But I think the next thing too is actually one more thing.
Yeah. Of
And
course.
it kind of backs into what we were saying already too, is it's having the right people around you. And
Hmm.
like, this takes a long time to figure out, right? I've definitely been in scenarios in my life too where you have people in your life and you feel obligated to being with them due to time, due to experiences, whatever it may be. If you feel some sort of moral obligation to be their friend or be in their
Yeah.
life, but you can choose who you spend your time with.
Yeah.
And it's a very freeing realization when you realize that if somebody drains your energy, and if somebody makes you feel like shit, and they don't listen to you, they don't hear you, they don't value you as a person, don't spend time with them.
Just don't spend time with them.
Yeah, like
They'll
you
they'll kick and scream. But usually they're on. Like we're all on a journey. You're so right.
yeah, and not everyone is gonna serve the same purpose in your life. I don't think everybody has the same role in
Hmm.
regards of like what they assist you with in your life, or what they not assist you with, but what they provide to you and what they add to your life. But I do think that you need to have people that challenge the way that you think, but also that you feel confident and comfortable talking to things about. Like, if you're
Yeah.
going through some stuff, like, have some good friends that you're like, you can call them, you can chat with them, and they can give you
Yeah.
some feedback, they can give you some perspective too.
At the end of the day, like, well, exactly that. You actually just said exactly what I was gonna say. It's like with my partner now, like, we're the same age, and we've experienced similar traumas in life, and we just view it a little bit different than we used to now. Like, I really like this book called The Prophet, by Khalil Gibran, and his take on love in it is so interesting. And it's like almost like out here, we were very much like, maybe my understanding of it, I'm sure people way more emotionally mature than I was back then, is that, hey, here's so and so and so and so, one forever. Sure, love that. I'm a romantic. That's a beautiful, like Romeo and Juliet's the best story ever. And so it's like tragedy.
Yeah.
But then I read this thing, and it's like, I'm going to paraphrase here, but it's like to love. It's like drink together, like not drink from each other's cups. Like stand close, but not as one. Because even like the columns of like ancient Egypt, their spaces, and it's like the person that I fell in love with is this existing person that didn't like have me in their life. So all of a sudden, if I'm in there and I'm demanding, oh, make me feel better, and all these things, they're not even that person I fell in love with in the first place. I've turned it into this thing about me. So I know for me now, like this working on emotional intelligence and understanding and building my steps to get, because the only time I really am ashamed of myself, and the same as the worst feeling you can possibly feel, the lowest possible vibration, is when I think that I've let my own things take over and now they're manifesting outside and I'm acting, my pain body is searching for some sustenance from other people. But I see us now instead of this as, and I do this with all my friends too, as now we're two like wonderful, like the helix, man, like DNA ascending together but not combining, you know. Um, and it took time to get here. So even like the three things you just said, like those are huge. Like those are like that to me is you quest a lifetime to learn those things. I think a lot of women honestly know it often. This is just dudes trying to be like, let's understand our emotions, which is awesome. We need this because every time I go and I'm like, oh, I had such a breakthrough talking with so and so. Tess is like, oh yeah, you're on the level now. I'm like, okay, whatever. At least we can figure it out. At least we have dudes talking about it now, you know. But adversity happens to all of us, all of us.
Yeah.
Um, I just saw her saying those exact words to me the other day, so I kind of forgot my thought there. But I just
You're good, man.
just love having a checklist, dude. And it's as simple as a checklist for me. I just did it over and over again, and I fell in love with walking on a bad day. Like on one of, like I never walked, man. I was like, I'm a trainer. I don't have to do these things. Like I get all my exercise in the gym, or I go play hockey or something. And I went on a walk because I didn't know anything else to do. And now there is not a day that's gone by in 4 years where I haven't gone on a massive walk and just observed nature and stuff like that. And I never would have thought of that if I didn't go through the shit. I never would have thought of all the things that really tie us together, man, that we talk about. Like I couldn't have, none of that exists without me going through adversity. And this is kind of a cool little thing at the end here is like, you said it, man, it's here to teach us something. And if it's here to teach us something, there is some kind of grand scheme behind this that allows me to have, they say in AA when you're getting sober, like you got to believe in a higher power. And, there's whatever you call it, nature, God, the universe, the source, whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's cool, whatever you want to call it. But if I believe these things, this adversity is coming to teach me something, then there's some kind of mechanism and scheme to this, and that's pretty exciting to me. And I
Yeah,
know
there has to be.
when the darkness has hit the levels of darkness that it's been, it really, like, knowing that I'm not alone, which sounds so basic and cliche, or that there's something, or maybe I planned this whole thing and we're just in a video game, I was like, put these people in it, I'll figure it out. But give me
Yeah.
this cheat code, where I can truly choose. And like, what a cheat code, man! It's
Yeah.
like totally wild. It's wild to think. Do we have time for me to share my little San Diego little piece at the end here?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, let's do it.
Sure. I'm not going to tell like all the circumstances that got me there, but I guess what the point of it is when I thought I had really gotten to a point of holy shit, I can handle anything. Nothing can rock me. If as soon as I started buying into my ego like that, and whether it was music, fitness, hockey, like anything I'd done in my life, the world would fake me and be like, "Well, have you thought about this?" And there's something kind of fun about that. But in 2023, great business. I was running a private business, training a different place in the city that can't say enough good things about it. It was great. And, I had a family member that was getting ill, and it was kind of like my real only ally growing up in the family. And didn't know how to deal with it. And I was ashamed because, like, oh, I read all these books and people train with me because I think I'm like so positive mental and I can make people feel better. And I didn't understand how it could be happening this. I'm like, how can this happen to me again? And all the darkness came in, familiar thoughts came again. And I did what I've always done in that situation. And I went to California. And I love California and I love the Southern California and the idea of it, but it's really more of an attitude than anything. But anyway, so I'm going through it down in San Diego. I have a family member dying back home. And I'm just like not talking to anyone in my family and clients or friends. I just isolated myself down there, and I thought that's what I deserved. I couldn't figure it out, and I knew all the things we talk about right now. I was like, I knew it all. Like I knew all of these things, or thought I did. I thought I had understanding. And I would down in San Diego. For anyone listening's been there, there's like the Embarcadero, and that's where they have like an outdoor music hall there, kind of like a classic walk along where the docks would be in an American city, and that big aircraft carrier is there. And then I started thinking about things, and I was like, yeah, when I was a kid, like I was born in '86, and that year, three movies came out that are still like my favorite movies. Classic, like boy born in that time, but it was like Top Gun, Aliens, and Terminator 2. And I was like, hell yeah! And I was like, well, Top Gun really affected me, and that was filmed like right here, like all like the aircraft carrier is sitting in front of me, and I started thinking about it, and I was like, man, like you're this might be the worst adversity I've ever faced in my life or created to have faced, and I had my sobriety and I was so happy about that, but everything was falling apart. It was a real dark night of the soul. But so I did the steps that we said to do. Okay, so I was down there for 2 months at this point, and I'm sitting on this little berm at the Embarcadero, and this berm looks really, I think it almost is like my baptism. I'll go on like Google and zoom in just to look at it. It's so proud. And I go on YouTube, and I'm like, I just need someone to say something that hits my heart because I don't have it right now, and I hadn't talked to my family in months, and I knew it was. I was like, either I die here or I figure this out. And I listened to just an Alan Watts live lecture recording from like the '60s or something, and he's saying some things, and I hear this like bell. Why do I know the sound of this? And then I realized that the lecture he's giving was done where I'm currently sitting, spot. almost the exact spot on this berm at the Embarcadero in San Diego by the water, looking out across at Coronado. He, years before, was giving this lecture to, I don't know, some students willing to listen to it, and just all about, this is some cool Zen stuff and the power of awareness. I'm like, how is that possible? How is it possible that I'm in this area that literally was my first love, which was like, I wanted to be like a fighter in California, like, just be all cool and stuff. Tom Cruise, so the character he played, make that important, important thing. And I think about it all the time. And it's like, how did I get that there? And when I got that there, you know what the first image that came to me was, man? It was that freaking ball from 500 Days of Summer. I saw it again. This stupid bouncing ball. And instead of chaos, it bounced in rhythm. Called my mom. We had the most real conversation her and I have ever had in 37 years at that point. I broke down crying, like these tears of like, holy shit. I felt, you hear people talk about it in like ayahuasca trips or something, or like in just, it was the darkest, darkest, darkest. And I was reaching out for something. And again, algorithms could explain this whole thing, but the fact that that lecture found me at the time and I was right there did something to me that ignited this fire in me. And that would have been in like January of last year, that I still feel to this day. And it was that same image that took me out in 2012, the bouncing of the ball. So even though I had gained all this wisdom, all this stuff, thought about the universe differently, thought about everything differently, it was that original movie that got me out the first time that came back to help. And then I applied the wisdom back home, and here we are today. But I just can't stop thinking about it, and I believe in all these things, and whether you believe in it or not, that's totally okay. Dude,
No, that's
like I said to everybody, like,
yeah.
you all do you. I support. If something makes you happy and you're not hurting people, yeah, get it. But that just was, I just saw it for maybe the difference was this time I didn't just see it as a random event. I saw it as something that was there to teach me something, and I could not be who I am right now with this, stepdad, father to be in the summer, husband. I just couldn't be the level I wanted to had I not experienced that. I think I had a little awareness of that. You know what else saved me too was exercise, as it always does. The only gym I had access to were the stairs at the San Diego Convention Center. For anybody who's ever gone to like Comic-Con or anything down there, those stairs there. And I said, well, what do I do? I exercise. I tell people all day is to make you feel better. I ran up and down, and it got there. And that was the start. There was much more to face after that. I made it home in time to say goodbye to my grandma, which was a huge, important thing to me. And I think all of that was use of divine misinterpreted. It was quite crazy. And now when adversity shows up in my life, I know it's not just me. That's what it is. And again, maybe I just believe that and it feels different. But it was profound, man. It was super profound.
Yeah, and I think the lesson itself can be divine without the circumstances being divine.
Absolutely, man.
So I think what you're able to gather from it. Yeah, so I think what you were able to gather from it was obviously divine. Like, it taught you a lot about yourself, and I think that's incredible. Obviously, the circumstances were shitty, but I think you were still able to see it as a thing that this adversity had taught you something, which I think ties into the whole podcast today. Like, adversity is there to shake you a bit, to rock you a bit, and it's there to see, okay, well, how far have you come along? Can you handle this?
We spoke last week, and if there's anything I could go back, if I'm going to my sports mentality here for a second, here, I was watching the game film of my experience down there. The only thing I would want to do better is just have that turnaround time. Because I sat in what was me for a long time, and now talking to you here, we had spoken about some things that kind of came into your paradigm last week that rattled you a bit, and what maybe what you kind of did exactly what we said here. You sat with it to understand it. We spoke about it a little bit, and you chose a path of action that we thought was going to be the most direct. And you did all those things. And you feel today from it.
Feel good, man.
Still,
no, it's interesting how you look back at things too, and you think about a time in your life where maybe you didn't have the tools, right? And it's like we've spoke about it here too, where you catch yourself in like that drift, you catch yourself in that spiral too. So it's cool to see what things can happen as time goes on and as time progresses too, and how much your ability to navigate these things just changes. Because I don't really believe that the things that happened to us change, I think those things still relatively stay the same. I just think it's our capabilities to handle them that improves.
Mhm. I think that really turns us into who we are and who we're trying to maybe the image of ourselves that we hold ourselves to ourselves and to our relationships in life.
Yeah,
I know, and the constant
I agree.
pursuit of that, which truly is what gets me going every day. Like I wake up, I feel like I'm still the same Rob waking up as when I was a kid. Like I still, there's that brief little moments where from my personality downloads. Where I sit, and if I let it go, I'll feel that pressure on the chest. But what truly is amazing is I've got enough repetitions through it where no matter what I feel in the morning now, I know it's not going to be. If it's the perfect fucking vibration for the day, hell yeah, let's ride it out. I'm not going to get in the way of it. And I have before I've gone in the way. But if it's not where it needs to be, I trust that it will be, or I start the application of the things it did. And that's, I built a morning routine and I fought this forever. I fought discipline. I fought, discipline to me, I had a negative connotation with. So when I heard things later in life, like discipline is freedom, I thought it was fucking stupid. But for me, my discipline is freedom now. And my routines are almost a framework for me when this goes. Now, you said sink or swim at the start of the pod. I have those tattooed on me just above my knee. Here's a question for you. I got challenged in this the other day when someone saw my tattoos. Sink or swim, man. I'm like, yeah. Like, well, that's pretty black. They're like, well, what about float? I'm like, oh,
Oh, interesting.
I know. And I'm looking at my legs like, how am I going to fit that word in here now? but sometimes floating is what needs to happen to get the right idea of what. That's like chess, right? Like, you're not just going to like instantly react and get there, right? And we keep coming back to that, like pause, understand, collect information,
Mm-hmm.
not
Yeah, no,
react.
that's that's interesting. I never thought about it that way, but it makes sense though. I mean, maybe there can't just be the black or white concept to it. There kind of has to be the in between.
And I think both are cool. Like both can be true, right? Like there are times in my life where I need that militant sink or swim attitude, and there are times where I need the float attitude as well.
Yeah, I'd
Fuck that.
agree.
Fuck
All right,
yeah.
man. All right, man. I think we'll wrap it up here for today's pod. But I know that you
Absolutely.
wanted to talk about a couple books that we're currently reading, or a couple of
Sure.
our sources that we're pulling from for right now. So, did you want to go first?
Yeah, I guess I'll tell you what, I'll ask you. So what books yeah, like what are you gonna consume this week or did you consume last week that stands out to you?
So, I've currently been reading this book called Men's Work. So, it's by Connor Beaton. So, I actually believe he's from Edmonton.
So
But it's all about his big thing is he's not about therapy, he's about training. So he talks about how this book itself is about facing darkness, ending self sabotage, and finding freedom in your life. So a lot of it is regarding like trauma, but it's been really good. And honestly, if you're a guy that struggles with anything from your past, man, even if it's something to do with your parents, with relationships, with whatever it may be, I think there's a lot to be pulled from this that can help you navigate it and work through it and find your power, if that makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah. That I think you've told me about this before, but I know it was an Edmonton dude. That's awesome.
Yeah,
This is
so
something I'm gonna check into for sure.
I didn't either, and then I think I remember hearing recently that he was quoting, he was referencing like Alberta a lot, and I think he's from
Sick.
Edmonton. Yeah,
Alberta forever.
yeah.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. So I just wrapped a couple days ago. I think I talked about it last slide too, but it's Never Famous David Goggins. Now, let me just say it first. Like his big book was Can't Hurt Me, and I thought I didn't like that because I believe in understanding your emotions. I had judged it. And now, when it comes to the Navy SEAL books and stuff like that, I used to really draw a lot from that before I started getting into like kind of the older wisdom from Egypt and all that stuff. But I like to balance it out with a newer one. And what I liked about this one is he had all, the guy's story is crazy. I'm sure
Hmm.
most of the people that would listen to this know who David Goggins is, so I don't need to reiterate that. But this one's about what happened after. This isn't about going through Hell Week. This isn't about losing the weight, not liking their life. It's not about all the accolades and fame they got and all the marathons they ran after. Can't Hurt Me had success. It's about what he did then to continue this attitude going. And that's where I kind of feel in life too, is like what's, the stereos thing has come and gone. It'll be in a capacity for me. But I'm, kind of 40 years old here, and how do I apply this? And what is it now? It's worked already, and it seemed to have resonated. We were speaking about how we were doing the 2000 push-up challenge for mental health, and I think I'm the only one that finished it, and that's no judgment at all. The only reason I did
You
is
did, yeah.
the only reason I finished it is because I was reading this book, and I just knew, okay, here's a great application I can do from essentially the lecture of this book, and I had 683 to do on the last day, and I could never done that many push-ups in a day in my life, and I just kind of worked it in a certain sense, and got through it. But great book, that, and then I'm constantly just I have like three. I'm going to a bookstore right after this, and I have like three more on the go here, so I can't stop.
Awesome, man. For those of you that do not follow Robb already, Robb, what's your socials? Let's fire them off.
Just Instagram for now. So at ROBB, there's two B's in my name. So Robb Chalifoux, ROBBCHALIFOUX Fitness, Instagram.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Always a
pleasure.
pleasure, my dude. Talk soon.
Okay, sounds good.